Okay, this video is ever so slightly different to the normal in that I started doing something which I wasn't really planning on making a video from, but then I changed my mind, and halfway through I thought, I know, why don't I make a video about putting an SSD in a MacBook, which is what I'm doing here, as you can see. I own quite an old MacBook Pro, which has never been the fastest thing in the world ever, and of course it occurred to me that a good part of the delay, in the sense of, like, particularly in booting up, as you can see here, it's dead slow at that, and it struck me that a good part of the delay of that could be due to the straightforward spinning disk that's inside it, and updating or say upgrading one of these with an SSD drive is, by all accounts, very worthwhile, very decent, and quite simple to do procedure. So I thought, okay, I'll have a go at that. What you'll see me doing here, this is the final boot off the old hard drive in the thing. As you can see, that took, well, I'll go back and count it later, but quite some time. It was not, by no means was it particularly speedy. So I thought, okay, SSD drive, affordable, fairly simple, quite easy upgrade to make, at least by my standards. I say I'm not by any means any kind of expert in this, but it was something that I thought, okay, this is within my capabilities, let's give it a go. So what happened, obviously as the course of this video goes on, you'll see sort of like the many successes and of course outright failures of what I was doing. But the first thing I did was an attempt to copy the just image the internal hard drive onto the SSD, so that hopefully it would just like be a straight swap and it would work straight away. I understand that there is a mode you can boot into that more or less only starts up a very basic shell and lets you run up a copy of disk utility, and Mac disk utility does actually apparently let you just clone drives from one to the other, as long as the target drive is not smaller than the one that you're copying from. It should work, it should be quite okay. So I thought, okay, I'll give that a spin, I'll give that a try, and sort of like, as you can see, certainly as you can see here, we're shutting down here, and again this is still from the original old hard drive, and you can see it's slow. It is, well, there's not really any other word for it other than slow. It's just like, it just takes much too long. It is just painful. So instead we thought, okay, SSD drive, here we come. And as you can see, this is disk utility running. As you see, source is the Mac HD, the destination is the SSD. It's like a straightforward copy. As it turns out, that was running for about 3 hours. Like I've saved you a lot of time here by just bringing it in with 1 minute to go. You can see I stuck the SSD just in a USB 3 enclosure. That's one of the Seagate ones that I de-shelled a 5TB drive from, copying onto a 512 gig Crucial SSD here, which apparently, by all accounts, is quite a good drive, quite well respected, and as it happened to be slightly cheap on one of Amazon's lightning deals a couple of weeks ago, I thought, okay, let's get one of those. And as you can see here, this disk utility looks like it's working. I know there are other pieces of software, certainly on the Mac, that you can get that will do drive imaging, like SuperDuper or something like that. Again, people say good things about that as well, but I thought, okay, well, disk utility is built in and I understand it, I've used it before, so let's give it a spin. And and that's what happened. Of course, the question is, once that's done, will the cloned drive actually work? Will it even boot? That's a question which we'll obviously find out the answer to very shortly. I already know the answer, ladies and gentlemen, but I won't tell you just yet to maintain the surprise and delight of what's happening. But as you can see, the MacBook is not difficult to open. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screws around the outside. You do need a slightly small screwdriver for it, but I thought, okay, that's fine, I got one of those. And I've opened this before, because actually it came with 4 gigs of RAM. I put another 8 gigs into it. I was actually intending to give it a 16 gig upgrade, but unfortunately in my completely haphazard means of putting the RAM in, I managed to put it in the wrong way round, and then trying to get it out, I managed to destroy one of the SIMs by basically screwing all the resistors off the piece of RAM with an ill-judged piece of screwdrivering. So it was not a success, not by no means my finest hour. But as you can see here, what's in the MacBook is fairly straightforward. You've got your optical drive, you have your RAM, and over there, as long as you're very gentle, you can get the drive out of the unit, and you see that it's just got a fairly standard flat flex connector connecting into like a fairly normal SATA connector. So theoretically, okay, that should be easy to, take hard drive out, put SSD in. You can see that the hard drive actually uses 4 mounting screws, and when I say screws, of course they're not proper screws, they are Torx screws. All we need to do here is just very gently making sure we don't do anything too rash and stupid and end up shearing off the connectors, or cutting or crimping, or in otherwise bending up the flat flex cable. That would definitely not be a good time. But this is fairly simple. Just pull it out and it comes out nicely and quite simply. No difficulty at all. So that's fine. So theoretically, we take out the Torx bits and we discover immediately that cannot do. The smallest Torx bit that I have is actually larger than the Torx bits on the MacBook's hard drive. Those screws don't do anything important, he said arrogantly. Those screws are basically just really that they hold the drive steady and secure in the assembly of the MacBook. So I can do without it. I can just take the SSD drive and I can pop it in without the mounting, and obviously that means I can't go on any roller coasters with the MacBook, but nonetheless, I mean, this should be good enough. We can put the basically the mounting screw in, but as you'll see, it's like it wobbles a little bit from side to side. It's not entirely perfect, but to see whether this works as a proof of concept, and that's probably really all this is. I may not necessarily keep this drive in the machine. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but fairly simple. Screw the mounting thing back into position, drop the plate back on, turn it over, and theoretically Bob's your uncle. I'm not going to be quite so rash as to put the screws completely all the way back into this unit just yet. See if it works first. But there's also, as you can see on the old hard drive, there's a little piece of plastic which makes it easier to lift the drive out of the MacBook should you need to. Since we're not ignoring the mounting screws on the side, we don't need one of those either. So we've not put the screws back in, as you can see, but let's give it a try, see if it actually works. Press the button and see what happens. Well, it comes up at least with the familiar white screen. This is all good. This is an obvious sign of progress, a testament to the complete success of the project. Nothing can go wrong now. Something not right there. Whatever that flashing folder with a question mark in it means, it almost certainly means I messed it up. I've either not I've presumably just whatever I did, whenever I thought I was copying the disk, either for some reason, perhaps because it was in a USB enclosure, or perhaps because I probably just didn't do it right, or I copied the wrong part of the the wrong part of the drive, perhaps the wrong partition, perhaps I didn't image the whole drive, perhaps I didn't copy it on a partition to another, or something like that. Whatever I did, I messed it up. So change of plan. Instead of trying to copy the hard drive that was in this machine, let's try just put a new a blank OS on it, as if it was a brand new machine. We can do that by booting up and holding down Control R, which should get us into some kind of recovery menu. And it says starting internet recovery. This is delightful. I've obviously never seen this before, because I've never broken my Mac to such a degree that it's ever become necessary. But this is very nice. It seems to work. And what I found most interesting about this, which will become clear as this video goes on, is that this seems to download a new stub installer of OS X from the internet, but it never once asks me for a wireless password, and it's obviously doing it over wireless because there was no Ethernet cable connected to this. So it's either got some kind of memory from what was copied over to that SSD, which I doubt, because presumably if it was in the right place for it to be able to find that, it would have been able to start up the OS in the first place. Or perhaps the actual hardware of the MacBook itself has some kind of physical storage where that part of, or some kind of physical storage where the memory somehow of key information, like some kind of emergency Wi-Fi password to get back onto the network, is stored. I do not know. But as we can see, this is it's obviously doing something. 5 minutes, that's not a terribly long time. I mean, my internet connection is pretty quick, so it may be that you don't get this kind of recovery speed all the time, but let's see what it's doing. I'm obviously not going to sit here for the whole 5 minutes. I'm going to skip through this and jump forward to bring you the main points of what happened here and chronicle the complete fail so that future generations may be spared the nightmare of having to reinstall OS X on their MacBook. So what we get here is a kind of recovery mode where we can restore from a backup, and were it not for the fact that my Time Machine backup disk failed some weeks ago, and that's a separate story, then I could possibly restore from that. But no, so what we're going to do here, we're just going to completely reimagine or reinstall more or less a brand new system. As you can see, it's not happy with the existing file system on the SSD drive. I've almost certainly done something wrong. I've just not copied it in the right fashion. I don't know why it's offering me MS-DOS. That may indicate I've done something wrong, or it might just be the default that it offers you when you present it with a drive that it doesn't know how it should be. But I assume this needs formatting, so we'll give that a go. We'll call it Macintosh SSD, and we can erase that. Now, am I sure? Yes, I am. Erase. And that shouldn't take long, as indeed it didn't. And you may have noticed it, but obviously I haven't yet. That 64 gig capacity is much smaller than the drive actually should be. So whatever I've done here, I've royally messed something up. The partition must have been wrong or something like that. But what we will find when I go to install a new copy of Mac OS X is that it will, at some point, I will actually notice the problem there. I don't know why it actually offers me on my Lion, possibly just because of the age of the machine. Because the machine actually was running Mavericks. I think it was probably actually shipped with Lion, so that's probably where that memory comes from. And as you can see there, this is the point where I actually noticed, hold on a second, 64 gig, what's the deal with that? So again, this is what happens when you don't know what you're doing, basically. I have a vague idea. I have enough of idea. I mean, I'm not completely stupid. I have enough of idea what I'm doing to get myself into trouble, I suppose, but not sort of like I haven't yet with the Mac made the mistakes that kind of contribute towards your experience, so that like people who are very expert in certain things, they know what to look for because they know what's tripped them up in the past. I haven't made those mistakes yet. I don't have that learning, so I've only got a rough idea of the concepts of what's going on. And as I say, what I'm having to do here is quit out of the Lion installer. I'm going to go back over to the disk utility to find out what the deal with that 64 gig is, because it's obviously not right, and see if we can actually get the SSD formatted to 512, which, as you can see there, it actually says it is. So whatever happened, I don't know. I'm going to format it again just in case, in the hope that it makes any kind of difference whatsoever. So we type in Macintosh SSD, and see 512 gig. That's what we want, and just erase it. And you see there, it gives me a warning about erasing a partition. So that's probably what I got wrong. That 64 gig was whatever I did, I messed it up clearly. But over there we see there's a Mac SSD. That's a partition, so we should be good to go to actually install Lion. And hopefully, once I've installed Lion, I can then install Mavericks. Or actually, I think as it turns out, I went for Yosemite purely because that's the latest one, and it seems like I kind of lag behind in installing the very latest versions of OSs. I've felt kind of burned, I must admit, by iOS 7 on the iPads. I was, not really happy with the really substantial visual changes to that. And, I'm sure most people don't worry about that kind of thing, but it just annoyed me a little bit. So I'm a little bit cautious with upgrading straight away to very latest OSs. But as you can see, this is fine. It's getting on with installing OS X Lion. I think it's obviously downloading it. Actually, no, it can't be downloading it because it probably already got that from the thing before. But we'll give it some power, as it seemed to be complaining about that. And it's installing. It says, a couple of seconds ago it said 35 minutes. Now it says 21. So whatever's happening, it's pretty happy with the speed. It shouldn't take anything like that long. Again, I'm not going to make you sit through it. I'm going to sort of skip forward. So OS X is installing, and now it's going to take another 23 minutes. So exactly what it was doing before, I don't know. Why it's going to take, we have 2 rounds of installation, that's fine. You just leave it there and you wait for it to do its due, and you come back. Now you see what we notice here is that, listen to those fans. Whatever's happening here, the machine is making exceptionally heavy weather of it. You wouldn't have thought that actually an OS install would use quite so much power to the extent that it feels the needs to slam the fans on them like that. I've very rarely actually ever come across a situation where the fans on the MacBook have even come on at all, which again probably just speaks to the fact that I don't use it anything like as much as I should do. But as we'll see, it's installing. The percolations are imminent. It's almost finished. Again, this is probably the best part of about an hour I've telescoped down here into a few minutes of video. Hooray, it's complete, and we get to restart the computer in 7 seconds or less. So, that sounds very positive. Let's get that restarted and see what happens now. So we should be coming up into a completely clean install of Lion here. See how long it actually takes to start up. Hopefully not too long, because this is now all booting off an SSD. There's no hard drive involved here at all. But obviously I suppose the first boot of any OS is going to take a little bit longer while it works out where things are. But as you can see, it didn't take too long, and we have to go through the process of setting up bits and pieces. We have to be told how to operate our trackpads before we are allowed to progress into the main show of the OS install. But until we have demonstrated that we know how to do this, we are not allowed to do anything else. So, and there it is. That's looks like OS 10. Off we go to the application store to pull down the latest version of, well, let's go for Yosemite. We may as well try the very latest. We're kind of bleeding edge here with an SSD in the thing in the first place. So while that's downloading, we can catch up with Linus Tech Tips on the iPad. I'm sure this won't take long. Actually, it's going to take a very long time, so let's skip ahead to when it's all installed. I'll save you the time. Hey look, it's installed. Wasn't that good? So, we have an SSD installed. It's nice, it's nippy. We can get our updates and open up our Safari and all that kind of jazz. It's, this is very superficial, but basically the performance of this machine, now that it's got an SSD in it, feels a lot nippier. It obviously doesn't make the machine any less heavy, which is, I think, probably part of the reason why I don't carry it around with me to the extent that I do, say, the MacBook Air, which is a much lighter machine. And I think the actual lightweightness, if that is a word, is something that I actually appreciate far more necessarily than the power. But as you can see, I mean, we're getting, it works. There doesn't seem to be anything not to like about Yosemite so far, at least. It seems to have installed all the software that I'm after. So give it a test to see actually how fast it actually boots. This is, a very good key comparison, because we looked at this before and we saw how long it took. So with an SSD, is it any faster? And I suppose the answer is, well, yes, it is. That is just over a third of the time that it takes normally to boot up from a hard drive, so I can't really complain about that. Speed is good, nothing not to like about that, and we can open up and shut down the machine really quite quickly. But the key question, how quick is it? So I've got the Blackmagic speed test here. We'll give this a spin, and yow, that is pretty good. from my perspective. Just short of 500 megasecond read, and in the respectable 400s in terms of write. That makes every other Mac I own look like a piece of cheese. Even with the Thunderbolt connected Drobo, that gets nowhere near that kind of speed. I mean, like that sort of like tops out at 160, 200 meg for reading and writing. So just for comparison, let's try the this is the MacBook Air now. Let's try a disk speed test on that, just to see, in comparison. This is a stock Apple SSD that's already in the machine, obviously. And as you can see, the performance is, it's still good, it's still up to SSD levels, but it's nowhere near as blazingly fast as that Crucial SSD was. So that's quite impressive. If it weren't for the fact that the MacBook Pro is so heavy, I would probably be tempted to use that as my daily driver. But as you can see here, actually, the read performance, very, very impressive compared to the write. Actually, there's a substantial difference between the write and the read speed on the MacBook Air, which I've not seen on the Crucial SSD. But 612 megasecond read and even 150 200 meg write is no slouch. It'll do. But so yeah, I'm not really sure what we've learnt from any of this. But if you have any comments, please leave them. And thank you for watching.